Perfect. So. Good afternoon. I'm Dina Ladd, the Executive Director for the Missouri Cures Education Foundation. We're so excited to have you with us as we kick off WISER Week. We have people all around the state participating today, around the country, and we actually have a few people who are registered who are outside of the United States, so welcome. The mission of the Missouri Cures Education Foundation is to promote and protect medical research. And 7 years ago, we started the Women in Science, Entrepreneurship and Research Initiative. That has grown like crazy. We're so excited. We now hold WISER events in 5 cities around the state. We've expanded our WISER presence. You can now join our WISER Facebook group page, and you can listen to the podcast WISER Conversations. This week is St. Louis WISER Week, and we will be discussing professional development. Today, we're focused on mentorship. Tomorrow is marketing your talents, and Thursday, communication and negotiation skills. So we hope you can join us for all 3 sessions. I'd like to thank our sponsors for WISER Week. We had the slide up briefly. We have our gold sponsors, Benson Hill, and the Steinberg Family Foundation and WISER. And we have our silver sponsors, Washington University, St. Louis University, Pharma, the Plant and Science Life Center of the St. Louis Community College, Mid-America Transplant, bronze sponsors, Cortex, BDO, Commerce Bank, SM Wilson, and BioSTL. And then our media sponsors, Fox 2, KPLR 11, and Town and Style. So thank you in these challenging times. We really, really appreciate having our sponsors. We have a fantastic group today that's going to be discussing mentorship. And during our discussion, please feel free to submit questions in the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many at the end of the panel discussion. So let's get this discussion started. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Lisa Dorsey is the interim chair, Department of Physical Therapy and Athletic Training, St. Louis University. Lashana Lewis, director of the St. Louis Equity and Entrepreneurship Collective, BioSTL. Patricia Barco, senior director, strategic marketing, MaxSite. Diane Brockmeyer, president and CEO of MidAmerica Transplant. And Shameen Mola. She's the assistant professor of Department of Genetics, I2 at Washington University School of Medicine. Thank you, ladies, for taking the time to be with us today and to share your stories and advice. So we're going to just jump right in. So the first question, women leading women, mentorship. Explain how this describes the mentoring that you do for other women. And Lisa, I'm going to have you kick off the discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Dina. Hello, everybody. So in general, I think probably like everybody else on the call today and all the participants, mentoring occurs by all of us in formal and informal ways. And so we all connect from a personal and professional perspective that way. But I would say the title of our discussion today, Women Leading Women, is a little more personal for me, as about 5 years ago, I started noticing that there was an increase in interest from women kind of systemically across the organization around needing guidance and advice for professional growth and development. And so that kind of sparked an interest around, well, how can I best serve a larger population or growing population in professional development ways? And so it provided me the opportunity to think bigger and developed a company to be kind of a catalyst to develop programs, professional development programs for women in this. One of the ways that we do that is establishing mentoring and menteeing professional programs for those networking opportunities that women have across the organization. St. Louis University has been a host to one of those for 4 years, connecting over 100 women across campus and allowing them to kind of grow those networking opportunities, setting goals, holding us accountable. So we've taken it to kind of a larger national and even local level, providing mentoring and mentee opportunities, both personally and in that larger professional landscape, if you will.
That's fantastic. And Shameen, can you also add to that?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I echoed, all of her sentiment about the women leading the women in terms of mentorship. To me, a mentor is someone who gives you the gift of their perspective based on having traveled a few steps ahead of you along the same road. And really, for me, mentorship started, I would say, back in college when I was a student myself, where female students in technology field. So I'm a mathematician turned into a geneticist. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective where I'm coming from, there were this lack of women in technology and science, for that matter. So to sort of understand why that was the case, I believe that I got really involved in dealing with students, both at the academic level as well as in the more early on in the high school level at the time that I was in college. But then it perpetuated to all the things that I've done since I graduated, from working in Wall Street and academia and medicine and science. And really, I got involved in this institution called AWIS, Association for Women in Science, back in San Diego about 7 years ago, where we women come together, and these are all scientists, women across the field, that would allow us to form some sort of scientific activities for students, particularly predominantly for female students, to sort of engage them into interests in the science avenue. So now I have the good fortune of being at WashU and still be and continue providing the students both at the mentorship level, as in someone that they could relate to. Like I said, it's just sort of we're along the same road, and also hear the kind of things that we have all gone through our experience. So I'm very fortunate that I'm doing that with my students and inside, inside WashU as well as outside the WashU. So I think, I take this as a privilege to be in the position to provide that kind of mentorship to all the women, students, as well as, I would say male students as well, because I think both of those perspectives are very important to understanding how we go about, normalizing what we call the field of, career field, any specific field of, all the things that we do.
Thank you. Thank you, Shamim. The next question I'm going to ask all the panelists to answer, and I'm going to start with you, Lashana. What career opportunities or mentors helped get you to where you are today?
Well, one of the things that most people kind of know about was the Launch Code Coder Girl effort that came out of the Launch Code program. And I will say, truly, without the Launch Code Coder Girl program, I don't think I would have seriously considered going into a tech job. I had tried for so many years. And it was through that encouragement and the mentorship from the facilitators, from other women who were part of Launch Code at the time, that actually encouraged me to go ahead and pursue a job that I would have never thought, in 100 years that I would have had. So it is very, very important. And even those people, they asked me about, it's like, were those women programmers? I said, no, they just believed in me and they believed in what I could do. So that's another thing that I think we miss out on, is that we look for our mentors to mimic what we want to do. And sometimes they don't. Maybe they have the connections and the ability to see something in you and tie you into an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Diane.
Yes, I think that one of the mentors that I really refer back to was Dean Capel, who was the CEO here at Mid-America when I started over 34 years ago. And the thing that he did, he provided great mentorship, but he supported my growth within the organization, affording me opportunities to present to the board, being able to be a thought partner with some of our bigger innovative initiatives. And so then I began to have some name recognition, both within our board and also nationally, as you begin to find your place as you look across ours being a very small kind of niche piece of science. There are only 58 organizations like ours across the country. But nonetheless, I think it's important that we find those people that we can share those stories with, share those innovations with, and you want to look for someone that maybe to, I think Lashana's point, they may not identically agree with you, but nonetheless, they're willing to serve as a good background and a good bounce off for ideas that you want to bring forward to exploring your own growth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Patricia?
Sure, thank you. I think throughout my career, as I started back in Brazil and then I moved to the US, I had so many mentors that really helped me and pushed me through things that I didn't know I could do and I should be doing. There are some names that I can certainly share, but I want to especially mention Supriya Shivakumar. She was the one who hired me here in St. Louis, and then I moved from the Bay Area here. And I think because of the experience that she shared with me and the path that she showed me I could take, that really advanced my career and gave me the chance to explore things that I never thought I could do. So I think it just goes back to what Lashana was mentioning, that it has to be something that is going to not only believe in you, but show things that you can do that you didn't know you could. So I think that has been very important in my career.
That's great. Yeah. Lisa.
Yeah, I actually, in reflecting on this question, thought of kind of two pivotal points in my career where a mentor was really important. Initially, when I was a student still at St. Louis University in the physical therapy program, there was an instructor who had chosen a number of us, a small number, like 3 or 4 students, to come and speak to students who were in the sophomore level, and we were seniors. And she chose the individuals that she thought would be able to share and mentor those students as they were coming up through the rest of their career here. And so she saw that in us and said, hey, you guys can be the mentors for these particular students. And it's nothing I would have ever chosen for myself. So I really appreciated that she gave me that spark to stand in front of the classroom, which obviously led me down an education lane that I'm not really sure I would have felt comfortable doing. And then later in my career, one of my directors pushed me into my PhD, and without me understanding the need for that performance accomplishment that he knew I needed in order to continue to be able to achieve in my career path as an educator in higher education. He set me down the pathway that it was essential for me to be able to be successful as a higher education professional. So just kind of two different points that would have that really impacted my career.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And Shami?
So, I think my career path has been similar to what, Lisa had just alluded us to, having really great important series of mentors that have had really good impact and, early on life, and both, starting in the college level and going up to it where, they saw something that was really special, and they thought that, why waste that skill set? Go and be a good mentor, because like I said, I started my mentorship when I was a college student. So I taught students and sort of, gave me an opportunity to get to know them at the personal level. Like I said, this is about the perspective, experiencing all the things that you have accrued throughout your life, and, shed some lights. And, you'd be surprised that 80% of the time, at the student level, that's what they're all going through. So we all go through that, and having to be able to witness that and be able to take that as an experience, and sort of use that as a person, at a level that where I am right now. Mentorship has been a thing for me since I was a kid. So teaching, researching, talking to students, being able to provide that kind of perspective, and just talk about life in general. I think it was something that, at various different level, both at the college level, both at the, graduate level, I think I had a wonderful mentor who have really sort of paved the way for me to, say, this is the career that you probably should explore. Here I am,
Yeah.
exploring that.
Well, thank you all for those stories and different perspectives. And I want to encourage everyone, if you're just joining us, we're going to have some Q&A at the end of the discussion. So please put your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end. So how have your interactions with your mentors changed from your early career to now? And I'll start with you, Lisa.
So I think from the early career mentor-mentee relationships, I think I entered that with a little bit of naivete, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so I think the mentor really drove that conversation and really laid the breadcrumbs for me to kind of follow, and basically the advice that they provided given their professional experience, which was a terrific opportunity. But I think as I've matured through my career, I think the dynamics changed a little bit, and you have a little bit more idea of where you're going to go in your career, or where you would like to go in your career. And so you become the driver of the questions for that mentor, and your questions become more intentional, and the conversation becomes more rich, at least in my opinion. And I actually think, when I think about mentoring, I look at that as a longer term relationship over, guided advice over a period of time. And so I think my mentoring relationships in this part of my career, sometimes I flip that a little bit into more of a coaching opportunity, where it's really focused on, okay, I need your advice and your assistance around this very targeted topic. And so I think it's more targeted at times, a more targeted relationship, and the overall advice.
Yeah. So Diane, what about how mentors have changed for you since your early career?
I certainly think, much to Lisa's point, what you're looking for from a mentor as your career progresses is very different. So from when I started in this field till now, I mean, I seek out, in some ways, some of the common topics and some of those common things, but yet you're looking for more specific guidance. So for example, as I stepped into the CEO role, I really wanted to have a mentor on my board that could really help advise what did they expect from the CEO as a board member. And I have really been fortunate to have women on my board that have helped provide that. And we're good to seek that out. And I probably would have never considered a board member necessarily as a mentor back in my career when I initially started. So I think as our experiences change over time, what we're looking for in a mentor and what we need in a mentor changes as well. And I think the key for all of that is try to find someone who has the time to invest in you, regardless of what level you are, either early in your career or later in your career, because that's really the key, and someone that respects you for your knowledge where you are. I mean, you're seeking out growth through your mentor, but yet you want to be acknowledged for what you bring to the table as well.
Yeah, definitely. Shameen?
Yeah, just, to add to what, both Lisa and Diane just, talked about is, it started out as a mentor who you would go in for counseling, right? For me, it was a counseling, getting advice. But now it has turned more into a professional colleague, which is great because, you see that changes over time. And so we operate. So I work in an education area. So I do a lot of proposal writing for grants. And so I get those type of, like what Lisa was saying, it's a little bit more targeted now, where I could just go and seek out, some of those advices. But at the same time, I also learn a lot about the political, the atmosphere that how I should be navigating, through this different perspective, because, as a student, that was a different perspective. Now I'm a faculty, so it's a completely different perspective. So I think, those are the kind of things that, your mentors started to give you advice, and not only they become your colleagues, they become your friends. So, so that landscape changes, drastically from being a student to a faculty. And I'm like I said, I'm very, very fortunate to have, those people that constantly whom I could actually go towards and reach out for, any kind of advices.
Definitely. So I think we've established that mentorship can play a very critical role in our careers and our professional growth. So what should you look for when seeking out a mentor? Lashana?
Thank you. For my mentors, I always try to see, and this is going to kind of bounce a little bit off of our previous conversation we just heard, where not only are they ready to kind of grow with you, but be able to kind of pass you on. So if I get to a specific point where when I'm growing within my mentorship, that person can no longer mentor me on that level, say I've surpassed that level, or they may not have the time commitment. Some of the things I do look for is the ability for the mentor to kind of let me be able to kind of transition to something new and something different. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I know with some people, when they're very new in their mentorship journey, they're kind of looking for somebody to be there the entire time. But just as we have with our friendships, they grow and evolve. We should be looking for people who are willing to grow and evolve with us.
Yeah, that's great. And Diane, if you could answer this question also, and you touched on it just a bit, and I love what you said about having someone on your board that could mentor you. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was coughing. So I put myself on my mute. I apologize. So I specifically did that, like I said, as I came into the CEO role to make sure I was meeting the needs of the board, recognizing how did this organization look through the lens of one of our key stakeholders, our board members, and specifically, how did it look for me, trying to fill a role following a 29-year plus CEO. So the organization was going through a lot of change, and I wanted to make sure that I certainly exceeded what their expectations were. I mean, I could deliver performance of the organization, but I knew that there were also some relationship and some other elements that had been entwined over the course of all those years that I wanted to make sure I was meeting them at that level as well. I talked a little bit about the time to invest, that someone has to invest in you. I think one of the other things when you're trying to seek mentorship, especially later in your career, from people that are really busy, when you have those opportunities, go into it well prepared. Don't just let the conversation necessarily kind of float along. But if you've got a specific deliverable that you're after, a specific topic you'd like their insight on, that you want them to be a thought partner with you, I would just say, make sure you take the time to go prepared into those meetings or those phone calls. I think you'll get a lot more out of the time, and that you'll come out on the other side, not only with a great experience for you, but also the additional recognition from the one that's mentoring you, that you took it very seriously, that you're respectful of their time. And I think the other thing, and which I kind of alluded to, is you want someone that'll be a good thought partner, that can really help take you through pros and cons, if it's that type of issue, consequences and risk, but really think about someone that will have a rich conversation with you about the topic that's at hand for you on that particular time.
Yeah, that's great advice, Diane. Patricia?
Sure. So I think one thing to mention as well is that you don't necessarily need to have just one mentor. You can have different mentors for different areas. And I think one that has been very important in my career is to have something that it's close to me in my work, for example, and that can provide me feedback into the work that I've been doing, how I am just facing situations within the company and things like that. I think having somebody who is really willing to give you candid feedback, it's important. If you don't know, you cannot improve. So letting you know what can be improved is very important. So I see that as one critical. And then in other areas, just having somebody whose own career path you admire and you'd like to understand how the decisions were made, so that can guide you in how you make your own decisions for your career. And I think if you have already a goal in mind, that you know where you want to go, just talking to somebody who has experience in that specific area, that's going to help you a lot to get there as well.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is something that comes up, and a lot of people find it very confusing. Explain the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. And Lisa, I'm going to hand that off to you.
Sure. There does seem to be a lot of questions around these two words, and we've done a really good job explaining already this afternoon what mentorship means, or what mentors mean, and we've identified how valuable mentors are, and how you can have some for short term and some for long term. I tend to call them my human whiteboards. I think it's a great opportunity, right, to be able to bounce ideas off of individuals, and I expect them to give me critical feedback. I'm hoping for them to give me critical feedback and hold me accountable. And so I think that's very valuable. I think it's very valuable to have a diverse set of mentors. But when we compare that to a sponsor, they really are very different roles, although they can be the same person. But the role of the sponsor is very different. They're an individual who's really going to move the needle of your career. They're going to be a strong advocate for you in a particular moment for a particular activity. So when I think of a sponsor, I'm thinking of an individual who, again, is going to put you forth for a promotion or a project management or an award, or write a letter of recommendation. And I think Diane just actually alluded to that in her response a few moments ago. We're asking busy people this question: would you sponsor me? So come prepared. What is what are you asking them to do? You're asking them to do a very specific sponsorship activity, and then it's kind of a closure. And then they can go back to being your mentor if indeed they're the same person, but oftentimes it's not the case. And we as women need to ask for sponsorship. It is vital. It is really important for our career advancement.
Great. Patricia? Oh, you're on mute.
Just to add what Lisa just said, I think it's very important that you have your goal very clear in your mind. You know where you want to go, and then you can ask for somebody to sponsor you. And that's going to guide you. Who's that person going to be? It has to be somebody who's going to be sitting at the table when the opportunities that you are looking for are being discussed. So you need to have that information, and you need to build that relationship. You cannot just ask somebody to be your sponsor out of nowhere. So you have to be always networking, letting people know about you and about the work that you do. And then when you need that sponsorship, you're going to feel comfortable asking for it.
That's great. Thank you. And if you just joined, again, you can put your questions in the chat box. And I'm over here looking. We've got some great discussion going on over here in the chat box. I love it. We're going to get to as many of those as possible. And I love the interaction there. So our next question, so much of effective leadership is about educating through our own stories, our successes, our failures, and setting expectations illustrated by experience. So how important is it to share our own narratives when mentoring? Lashana?
One of the things I do whenever I have a speaking engagement is I try to throw in a personal story of failure. I feel like it's very important to kind of set the level and say, I don't think that I'm perfect. I don't think I've made all the right decisions. And, I've fallen on my face a few times too. One in particular, when it comes to racial equity, I talk to people about the implicit bias test that's free from Harvard University. And I told people, I give all these talks on racial equity and gender parity and all of that. But the realism is I took the test myself on racial equity, and I found that I had a bias against Black faces. And for someone who grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, 98% Black, I said, how dare you, Lashana, have a bias? How is that possible? But I told people it was very important for me to know that, because in my work, in my day-to-day, I was taking those hidden biases and implementing them in ways that I didn't understand. But the homework that I needed to do was that I needed to go back and figure out where those biases came from. And I understood how media affected me, television, magazine, in newspapers, et cetera, and so forth. The news even just had a general effect on me that was so unconscious that I was bringing that bias to the table wherever I was going. So whenever I try to mentor someone, I decided to go ahead and start sharing that. And I tell people whenever I'm doing speaking engagements, it's like a mini mentorship. You're doing it for an hour or two on a stage. And some people tend to think of that separate, but I said, you become a role model, whether you want to or not, within that moment. So that's something very important to consider. Even when you're thinking of mentorship just in the one-on-one role, there are various different efforts that can actually fall into that same realm.
If you have more information on that, that information on that Harvard quiz that you took, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could put it in the chat box, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. And just for everyone to know, there are tons of different tests. So they even have with weight or age, and other ethnicities as well. So just go through it, see which ones you're interested in taking, and they're all free and they're anonymous as well.
Great, thank you. Diane.
Yeah, I think it's critical to share your narrative when you're mentoring. I think that, and I think, Lashana talks about it's okay for those that you're mentoring to see that you too have had some failures. I think we learn the most from those at times. Those are very humbling experiences for us. And I think the willingness to share those disappointments that we've all encountered, and I'm sure all of us on the panel have had those opportunities, is really a key piece of mentoring for folks. So I think that you really want to try to also let them recognize that not everything is going to be smooth sailing, right? Whether it be a big failure or a small failure, or maybe just a hiccup along the road. That as we share our narratives and our stories, both the positive and the negative, they'll begin to see that it's not like it's a straight shot. Those journeys have a lot of winding and turns, and that they know that that's okay. And if they don't get there as quick as they anticipated, that's okay too. Because I think that the beauty in sharing, and conversely, I think we learn a lot from those that we mentor. I really appreciated excuse me, I really appreciated Lashana's comment too about multiple facets of mentoring. So whether it's you're presenting from a stage about, a topic that you're the subject matter expert, whether it's a formal arrangement, or whether you're in the olden days when we went to conferences and ran into people, you sit down and have a cup of coffee and just talk to them, especially those younger in our fields and those looking to grow. That not to get boxed into the fact that it has to be a formal, very elaborate relationship. I think we can impart those experiential learnings in a lot of different venues in a lot of different ways, and never to negate the value that even those small interactions may have on folks.
That is fantastic. And Lashana, there's a lot of discussion in the chat box over here if you're seeing that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And thank you, Diane, for your comments. I have our final question that I've put together, and then we're going to get over here to the Q&A. We've got a lot of great questions. But my final question is really, COVID-19 has really changed our world personally and professionally. And how are each of you coping, and what advice do you have for other women to get through this pandemic? Patricia?
Sure. It's been quite a challenge. I think it just got me in a very busy time of my life. I was finishing my MBA program, which I had to finish online. Then I was also in a path to career change and a change of jobs within the pandemic, and then school shut down, and then all of a sudden my kid is being homeschooled. So there was a lot going on. So I think for me, what made it possible to get through was just the support system that I have, especially with my husband, around helping with all those aspects so that together we can just keep moving. Being patient was also very important and continues to be very important. We're not through it, right? So I have to be patient and recognize that sometimes I'm not going to be able to do everything that I wanted to do. So giving yourself a break and breathing and knowing that you need to say no to some things, you need to prioritize in order to be able to keep moving in a home.
I don't know what you mean by I have to be patient.
Thank you. Diane?
One of the biggest changes for me, I was involved in some national work, so I did a lot of traveling last year. And so my traveling came to kind of a screeching halt in the middle of March. So whether good news or bad news, I'm in the office now with my team a lot more. We're not going to poll them and ask what they think, but it's been a challenge for me to really try to optimize not only their work experience, but their home experience, ensuring them that they can take the time they need, the things they need to do to balance. Like Patricia said, I don't have a small child that I'm homeschooling, but a lot of my colleagues do have that. So trying to find that balance. But I wanted to make sure that I was present for them, but yet still step back and respected their autonomy, because they had been doing a lot of things while I was on the road doing national work. And so I didn't want to come back in and take that and strip that away from them. So I think it's really important to kind of meet your work colleagues. I think the support system that you talked about, Patricia, is really important. But I think anything we can do to try to create some normalcy, during this challenging time has really been important. And we do some few small face-to-face meetings, mass, socially distanced, but sometimes just that networking and that interaction with some of us back in the office feels a little more normal than everything that we've had to adjust to do digitally. So it's just trying to be back home, be helpful, and stay out of their way to get the work done at the same time.
That's great. That's great. Lisa?
So I would echo some of the comments that we just heard, and I would even go back a little bit farther to Lashana's comments earlier when I read this question and it says, how are you coping? I would say this is a hashtag fail maybe for me. I think that this has been a struggle. But one of the things that comes to mind for me is I'm usually a big proponent of kind of work-life integration. I'm not a strong believer in work-life balance. I feel like that's a bit of a myth. But I really firmly believe of integrating kind of all the hats that we wear in a day. And it's been a bit of a struggle to work at home, school at home, and home at home, right? Because there's really no separation between all of those. So the integration is, what are we integrating? Because it's all in the same space. We're just moving from one room to the other. So I really had to kind of reflect on how can we make this work when we're all in the same space all the time. And some of those little things that I think have been impactful is I'm a bit of a planner. So just kind of planning the small things of, making sure electronics are charged. And so that's not a crisis. And it seems silly, but it can actually go a long way in our day. And I have been accused of maybe having some high expectations. So really just giving yourself that latitude to say, it's okay. Again, like Patricia was saying, this is not a typical time. you're just not always going to get everything right, and that's all right. And really having that support in your partners, whoever they may be, in your work life and in your home life, and relying on them, and know that it's okay to rely on others to help us all kind of make this work in the best way possible.
Yeah, I love that. It's like we're all in this together, right?
There's truth in that statement.
Yeah. Lashana?
I really had to do some reevaluation. As a woman, as watching my mom and my grandmother do things, we were these consistent problem solvers. The first thing we would do is see something happening and we try to fix it. And all we're doing is fixing, 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 and not thinking about what are the things that we necessarily need, especially in pandemics. Whenever someone skins a knee, even in little trauma situations, you're just thinking, 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 trying to resolve things. And I found out that I needed to kind of step back and actually look at the things that I did as stress relievers for myself that I would no longer have access to. And one of those things is I loved walking. And because I live actually in downtown St. Louis, walking is a little bit difficult. The sidewalks aren't necessarily 6 feet apart for people to walk. And I was leaving that out because I was trying to solve other issues and I was taking that energy and putting it somewhere else. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to invest in one of those little small fold up treadmills, which we ended up getting for our little home. So now I consciously make myself remember you need to walk, Sean. You need to get some of that energy out and kind of do that. And another thing that I ended up doing on top of that was reevaluating my relationship with my wife and saying to myself, am I telling her everything that's going on with me? Or am I just kind of focusing in on the jobs and the tasks that I need to do? Again, something harkened back to my mom and my grandma, and I saw them do that. So I was just thinking as I'm listening to other women speak too, it's like I had to scale up my vulnerability. I had to tell myself I have to be more open and honest about how I'm feeling, no matter how uncomfortable I am, because in the long run, it's actually made our relationship a lot tighter. And she kind of says, you need to take a break. You need to walk. Why don't you do this? I'll go into another room and we'll separate. And it releases a lot of tension. So for those of us who are, as all of us probably are, locked in with our spouses, our significant others, our family and friends, just remember the scaling up, the emotion and the vulnerability, even though it is very scary, it is very much worth it.
Yeah. And I think talking about getting out, the exercise, not just for physical, but mental. And those of us that have dogs, oh my God, our poor dogs, we walk them constantly these days. So, Shameen?
Yes, just to add to the challenges that we're all facing, and then I wanted to kind of tap into, I think most of the educators, what they're going through in terms of the teaching mode, the research mode. So I started my career here at WashU about a year ago, so you can understand. In the midst of all this pandemic, we have to, the career projection. I'm thinking, oh, I need to be able to go to the lab and perform all this research because I have a research lab, right? And then without that, I will not be able to do all this, apply for proposal, grants and whatnot, right? So that was sort of like minded, someone coming in, trying to do that aspects of it. And then there's that aspects of teaching. Okay, so I think the teaching mode has changed quite a bit for those of us who are doing this Zoom online activities, because I'm a believer of active, meaning students being involved in learning, because it's a didactic process where the learning and teaching is sort of a feedback loop. And this has posed quite a bit of a challenge, just to say the least. I mean, I do not have children at home, but I can tell you that the students become my children, because now I have to think about how they're learning, what are the modes, because we do have students, registering for classes from all around the world. So there's the timing issues, there are cultural aspects of it. And because of this whole challenge of being inside, their mental issue, I think this is very important. How do we provide that normalcy, right? I'm teaching this mode of teaching. How do I make sure that, they're in the right set of mind, to be able to learn more effectively, as well as, every time I'm going to my class, I said, guys, let's spend 10 minutes talking about how how was your weekend, right? Like, let's talk about what kind of challenges, did you feel? How are the, homeworks and the projects that I'm assigning? Is it something too much for you to deal with? Because those are very important, right? So being a mentor, being a teacher, you have to take those into account. And I think even more so now, because the whole modality of this whole, teaching process, dealing with students has changed. And just to, be, mindful about that, where, we're doing all this online version. I wish I could, have them come into class and sort of, provide that, project base where the students cannot talk to each other. So that there's that challenge part of it that, we're kind of navigating through this. But I would have to say I'm very fortunate that WashU provides this outstanding, staff and resources that are helping us, kind of navigate through that. From the research aspects, I have lots of students who are also in my research lab coming from various different countries. How are they coping with the situation when they're away from their family, thousands of miles away? So, so in addition being their mentor, I have to be sort of like their mother, so to speak, like, hey, so is everything okay? And I'm constantly thinking about, I live in Central West End, close to the park. Some of the students are, the close proximity. So we try to come up with activities where we could still maintain that, 6 feet social distancing, but, provide or integrate this, sort of like normalcy, like, let's just go to the park, put on masks, talk about research, right? Just so that, we can have that, the humanistic aspects of it, going in, because I mean, it is such a challenging time. I cannot tell you, it would be easy to say, oh no, things are great. No, it's not. It's very challenging, but we're getting through this all together. So, it's been quite an experience, and I'm hoping that, hopefully we will started to slowly but surely get into that normalcy of, try to find an innovative way of, integrating all that humanistic, aspects of it, as well as being more effective in terms of learning and teaching. And so,
Thank you. I appreciate all of you sharing, your personal stories with us, because I think right now we can all relate. There's a theme running through this, so I appreciate it so much. I'm going to turn to the questions, and there's a little bit of a theme with the questions, talking about formal versus informal mentors. And that question kind of dovetailed to another one talking about, let me find it up here. So with a mentor, the issues you discuss with other women or men, particularly if it's about your children or caring for your relatives or advocating for family benefits, or when it's time to lean in or lean out, so kind of the informal discussions you have versus the formal discussions you have with your mentor. Who'd like to take that question? Lashana?
Sure. I was also typing in the chat to
Oh,
try to
sorry.
get to people. Just to let everybody know, I put in a link to my Calendly. So anyone, if they want to continue conversation one-on-one, I have an online calendar there. But as far as, I guess, with mentorship, and can you repeat it one more time, because I was
Yeah,
multitasking and typing.
kind of the informal versus the formal relationship that you have with your mentor. So if you want to discuss, you're taking care of a relative, or how to take care of children, or something complicated is happening in your life personally. So those kind of different informal versus formal mentoring.
Yeah, no. When I think of the formal versus informal relationship, I feel like it just kind of oscillates back and forth, especially during the time of COVID-19. I've had some formal mentorship opportunities where we needed to reschedule. Something traumatic happened, something bad happens. And I tend to tell people, look, we are in a very interesting time. There's a very interesting set of circumstances going on, and we need to be able to kind of tell ourselves, if I was in that situation, how would I want someone to treat me? So one of the things that I've decided to do was to kind of offer that too, within a realm of professionalism. So as everyone has seen, my online calendar link is there. But instead of getting mad and all worked up because somebody missed an appointment, I say, hey, there is a reschedule link. Whenever you have more time, feel free to, schedule here. In that way, I'm still kind of giving credence to the fact that I understand that things outside of your circumstance might have happened, and I don't need to personally know what that is. But in a professional sense, and the honoring of the fact that my time is important, their time is important, I try to offer that as kind of this way to say, I am still here. I'm still ready to help you when you are in the space. And I'll give that kind of to the person that I'm mentoring, because I said to myself, I would want someone to treat me that way too. So when I look at it, I try to um, be lenient in my thought and more precise in my action.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's fantastic. We've got some requests here talking about if some of the panelists would be willing to talk to like a Girl Scout troop and so forth. And thank you. If you, I don't want to put the panelists on the spot, but if you're comfortable sharing your email address in the chat box, that'd be fantastic, because we have a lot of conversation going on over here, and they can contact you directly. Patricia, there is a question here that talks about getting into a new career, or switching careers, or so how do you find mentors when you're going into a new field, or into a new career?
I think your mentors, they just accompany you as you navigate those changes, right? But I think it goes down to the power of your network. So if you are planning, in my case, I did not change industry. I changed to a different company, but I didn't change industry or sector. But if you are looking into doing that, having a network that is effective and get you to know people that are in the new field that you want to get to, it's going to be very important to help you get there. And I think it's a lot of participating in events like this and getting to know people, or being more active in professional social media is going to help you a lot as well. And then it's just being comfortable reaching out to people that you might not know. And you're going to be surprised how receptive people are to giving advice and helping navigate career challenges or career changes. So you just have to get out there and ask. And you're going to be surprised at how many people are actually going to respond to you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, Dina, if I can just kind of combine that with also the comments that Lashana had relative to formal and informal. So sometimes when we transition from one position to another, you may find that there is a more formal structural mentoring program already in place, right, at your organization or institution. So if we're thinking informal and formal, as Patricia was just alluding to, you may be bringing your informal mentors with you, right? They're always with you everywhere you go. But you may also be assigned more kind of a more inorganic, formal or structural mentorship opportunities within your organization, which are non-gender specific, which also gets to the question, I think, in the chat, that everybody really needs mentoring. I mean, mentoring is one of those pieces that it's for everybody, and even mentors need mentoring. I have a ton of mentors, which I'm eternally grateful for. So mentoring never really ends for any of us. And it can be formal or informal based on structure. It can be formal or informal, as Lashana said, like formally scheduled or not scheduled, just that flexibility model where we're popping into somebody's office for that advice and mentorship. They can come with us in a transition or not, et cetera. So kind of depends on sometimes the structure of the organization relative to that formality piece, if you will.
Yeah, I love that, but I'm kind of going to put you on the spot there, not you, Lisa, but all the panelists. So a couple of the questions have been, when is it too late to get a mentor? Which I don't think it ever is too late.
Never.
And then also, if you're not working for a large corporation or an organization that has those types of programs, where do people go to find a mentor?
I'll speak up a little bit on that. There are other organizations, WISER obviously is one of them, where you can find both formal and informal mentors, if you like. A lot of people tend to tie to local organizations within the St. Louis region. St. Louis Equity and Entrepreneurship part is a partnership as well as a collective, but we also welcome members to come and provide mentorship or receive mentorship within our organization. So a lot of times I tell people, you know, go to a nonprofit or a charity or something of that nature that you might be specifically interested in that may do some social organization things. For the Black community in particular, and being an engineer, I was a part of NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. Which is again, or another organization that caters to that specific group of people, and you can find mentors and sponsors there as well. So even if you can't find it within a formal corporate environment or formal organization environment, there are other charities and organizations and social groups that you can join. And sometimes, for instance, I'm the chair of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, and we get a variety of different members from all walks of life. And I found out that one of the people I was working with is a retired project manager, and he needed somebody who understood from both the IT project management perspective, as well as the diversity, equity, inclusion perspective for some things. So was able to kind of give a little bit of mentorship for people that he knew. So there are a variety of different ways that you can find your mentor. I suggest that people don't lock themselves down. But there are a lot of organizations out there, and a good Google search will land you on quite a few within the St. Louis region.
Fantastic. Anyone else have any?
I was just going to say, many of us had those programs through our national association. Our company's not large either, but there is a pairing organization in our association. So kind of like you mentioned, NSBE, Lashana, there's other organizations like that nationally that do offer those mentoring programs. So.
Okay. Anything else? Well, I really hate to end this conversation because I know I'm having a great time listening to everyone and listening to your great advice. And Lashana and Lisa, Patricia, Shamim, and Diane, I thank you for being so open and giving your advice. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors today. I want to do a shout out to Ellie Hayes. She is our outreach director, and she does an amazing job keeping all of our virtual events all put together. That's just one hat that she wears. Ellie and I make up the Missouri Cures team, just the two of us. But I really appreciate everyone's time today. Tomorrow, we'll be back for WISER, and we'll be discussing marketing your talents. And then on Thursday, it's communication and negotiation skills. So we hope to see you all there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.